As CGI has adapted and improved in the modern age, a filmmaker's ability to create terrifying visions from their deepest nightmares has become more possible. While some would argue that this takes away from the realistic nightmares that were created by killer practical effects in movies like The Thing, there are nevertheless some CGI creations which stay with us long after the movie is over. It is undeniable that horror thrives on awakening your darkest, most unimaginable terrors, and CGI occasionally allows those to be realized in a way that practical effects simply cannot. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 scariest CGI movie monsters. Number 10. The homunculi. Don't be afraid of the dark. Troy Nixey's 2011 remake of Don't Be Afraid of the Dark may have gotten mixed reviews from critics, but it was undeniable that the director created something truly pant-wettingly scary in his design of the homunculi. These little monsters live in the basement of the manor house where the movie is set and desire the teeth of children. Add to this their creepy whispering to protagonist Sally, and they become even scarier. Even worse, the homunculi attack en masse as well and take people back underground with them, turning them into homunculi themselves. Now, I'll let you guys in on a little secret. I was absolutely terrified of the Tooth Fairy when I was little. To this day, I still haven't seen Darkness Falls because the idea genuinely traumatized me, and it would keep me awake at night, and then my parents would tell me off. So all I'm saying is, I'm really glad this film did not come out when I was younger. The homunculi's origin within this movie is also unknown, but they don't need to be explained. They're terrifying enough simply existing within the house and desiring the teeth of any children who crossed their path. These really are Tooth Fairies from hell itself. Number 9. Clover, Cloverfield. When Cloverfield came out, hype was already through the roof for this mysterious found footage creature feature. But it was only when the audience actually saw the titular monster Clover that the movie turned into something truly special. Where Clover stood away from the classic likes of Godzilla and King Kong was in its maneuverability. Crashing through the city, darting between buildings, Clover is an unstoppable force that seemed to want to actively wipe out humanity at its feet. The true fear in the movie, however, comes from these spider-like creatures that Clover releases into the city, which seems so incredibly alien, yet way too eerily familiar. This is brought to its height in the scene in the subway tunnels, where the creatures come out of the dark and inflict a terribly gruesome death on our heroes. The giant monster is already scary enough, but those parasites it shakes off? Absolutely not. Get in the bin. Number 8. Pennywise, It. While this may seem a little bit out of place considering that Pennywise is oftentimes not CGI and portrayed admirably by the incredibly talented Bill Skarsgård, for my money it's when Pennywise becomes a CGI monster that he becomes truly nightmarish. Him unhooking his jaw and going in for a bite of boy arm could have looked incredibly dumb, but it kicks off the first movie in a completely disarming oi oi way. Those rows of razor sharp teeth like a shark's, his gigantic mouth, and his haunting hungry eyes, that's pretty spooky. It's all the other forms that Pennywise can take that work effectively as well. Manifesting as the deepest fears of each kid he's haunting, it means that even if you're not scared of clowns, there will be something Pennywise transforms into that does hit a nerve. Pennywise was the original creepy clown, and the design in the reboot shows just how creepy this clown can still be. Number 7. Shelob, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. The Lord of the Rings has a number of terrifying creatures appear over the course of the 3 films, but the scariest of all comes in the 3rd movie after Frodo and Sam get separated. Gollum, the cheeky scamp that he is, convinces Frodo to travel through the Pass of the Spider, which turns out to be the humble abode of Shelob. Sadly, Shelob isn't a nice old lady who'll invite you in for a cup of tea and some custard creams, but is a horrifying monster with an intricately detailed and nightmarish design. Shelob has these horrible dripping fangs and moves exactly as a giant spider would, with incredible speed and unimaginable ferocity. While Shelob's design is accurate and terrifying though, with her large, hairy body, it's the image of her poisoning and webbing Frodo, readying him for lunch, that really takes the biscuit. For me, that's a fate worse than death that you'll absolutely be dreaming about for weeks afterwards. Consequently then, Shelob is a cursed name for arachnophobic fantasy fans everywhere, me included, and with good reason. Number 6. The Dementors, Harry Potter. The Dementors in Harry Potter are not only terrifying to look at, but terrifying in the world of the narrative as well. Originally the guards of Azkaban, the magical prison, and then servants for Lord Voldemort in the later movies, the Dementors are creatures that literally suck the happiness out of you, eventually taking your soul if not stopped. The Dementors induce fear in all who come across them with obvious reason. Visually, they're nightmarish as well, shrouded in ratty black cloaks and floating around like ghouls. And that's just in the Prisoner of Azkaban when they're first introduced, but it's in the Order of the Phoenix that they reach their true fear potential. In this film, the cloaks are tightened, giving the Dementors a skeletal and rotten look. For films that are not strictly horror movies, the Dementors design is one that lifts the Harry Potter films well and truly into the realm of nightmares. These guys appear as the Harry Potter franchise went from being a light kid series to indulging in darker stories, and the design of them reflects just that. Number 5. The Bear Annihilation. 2018's Annihilation was a hit among audiences when it came out, at least in part due to its creepy and unusual visuals. However, the movie went from kinda creepy to oh my god, this is terrifying around the 75-minute mark in a scene that has stuck with audiences since. It's the bear scene. At this point in the story, Gina Rodriguez's character Anya has tied up the remaining members of the crew that have ventured into Area X when she suddenly hears the screams of another character, Cass, who had been abducted earlier in the movie. She rushes out to meet the cries and then is killed. And then this great big massive mutant bear thing just appears out of nowhere and puts the craps well and truly up you. The front of its face is rotten with missing eyes and its skull protruding from its head, which might have been kinda manageable, but as it opens its mouth and Cass's dying screams emanate from within, all hope is completely and utterly lost. This bear has a human voice and it has human screams. We probably can't play any of the dialogue here, and you know what? I'm kind of actually pleased about that. I don't want to traumatize any of you guys who haven't seen it, but I thoroughly recommend watching this movie. Number 4. The Tooth Fairies, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. Much like the homunculi, these monsters feed on teeth, as well as other organic matter. In the movie, they're introduced when an exiled prince of the magical creatures uses them to kill an auction house full of people in order to get back part of the crown he needs to control the titular Golden Army. By the time Hellboy and the BPRD get there though, everyone in the auction house has already kind of been eaten by the little monsters and deposited on the auction house floor. These tooth fairies are the classic trope of a small creature appearing cute until they attack, and that's one of the reasons they instill so much fear. The tooth fairies attack en masse, swarming their prey and devouring them completely. Like locusts, but worse because, you know, tooth fairies. The image of hundreds of these little creatures swarming you and then devouring everything in a matter of minutes is enough to get well and truly under your skin for a while afterwards. Number 3. The Xenomorph, the Alien series. While the Xenomorph in the original Alien movies was done with practical effects, Ridley Scott's recent additions to the series have included a CGI Xenomorph, allowing for an alien that is more mobile and even more animalistic. While the recent Alien movies have had a mixed reception, the Xenomorph continues to be terrifying, killing idiot characters who think an alien organism being on the loose provides the perfect conditions for shower sex. The fear is upped by the gruesome nature in which a Xenomorph is born as well, of course. Most audiences by now will remember the Facehugger, the terrifying face-humping creature that loses nothing when created with CGI rather than practical effects. The Xenomorph has stuck around as one of the most iconic movie monsters ever, with Alien remaining a classic horror movie over 40 years after its release. Even with the growth in Alien films, the Xenomorph still holds a special place of fear in audiences' hearts. Number 2. The Monsters, A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place was John Krasinski's directorial debut and created a terrifying post-apocalyptic world. The monsters in the movie are animalistic creatures with incredible hearing and intent to kill anything they happen to hear. Armed with razor-sharp teeth and claws and armored bodies, they seem virtually unstoppable. The audience is not granted a full view of the monsters for much of the movie, and when they are glimpsed, it is a horrifying sight. The creatures are large with long limbs, allowing them to move at incredible speed. speed. Alongside this, their armor can lift up and rotate, allowing them to track the sounds they hear more accurately. Apart from this though, little is actually known about the origin of the monsters in the film, and it hasn't been mentioned at all in the story so far, which certainly adds to the mystique. The design alone is nightmare-inducing, but the monsters, dubbed Angels of Death in the movie, create a world that is a truly terrifying place to live, in which the slightest sound can mean a quick, painful, and certain death. Number 1. Every last creature in that ending. The Cabin in the Woods. Drew Goddard's 2012 horror satire turned the notch up to 15 with its ending, which saw the two remaining heroes break into the organization that's been orchestrating their demise and release all of the monsters that are held there. Every kind of horror movie monster you can think of can be seen tearing apart the entire base, and while some of these aren't CGI, such as the zombies and the terrifying merman that comes in at the end, a great deal of what we do see is CG, especially as the truly outrageous monsters start to show up. Some particularly honourable mentions go to the giant snake, the ghost, the strange killer robot with the buzzsaws, and what can only be assumed to be the actual Kraken. All of these monsters rack up a hefty death toll, with everyone in the base falling to them eventually, and if they didn't get any of the surviving characters, then a giant god rising to destroy the entire world at the end certainly finished the job.